And Richard Bowman.
Yes, Richard's not joining us. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity for us to talk about our submission on the Gene Technology Bill. As we've outlined, Midlands is a family-owned, export-orientated company based in Ashburton. The company established in 1990 after the challenges of subsidy deregulation and drought, with the mission to improve farm gate prices to the arable farmer. And we thought we seek to add value and new crop opportunities for our farmers. Today, Midlands is a group of vertically integrated business units. We have over 100 highly skilled full-time staff. We export to more than 40 countries, and we create revenue in excess of 100 million New Zealand dollars. We're a significant player in the high-value vegetable seed export business, and we're one of New Zealand's largest honey exporters. Our company has invested heavily to promote the New Zealand brand. We've developed premium offerings to discerning customers. And I'd like to hand over now to Simon, who will talk us through our concerns with the current bill.
So following careful consideration, we'd like to express several concerns we have with the proposed bill and the risk it represents to current export earnings in the agricultural sector. We agree with the purpose of the bill to update and future-proof the regulation around the use of genetic technologies. This is long overdue in New Zealand, and however, we are very concerned that this bill falls short of what would be truly beneficial to New Zealand's primary sector in its current form. This appears to be a very rushed process, and for the risks that to the economy and the environment, we feel this is wrong. Firstly, why has there not been any economic analysis done on this proposed bill? Our economy is driven by exports from the primary sector, and the proposed bill fails to account for the risk the use of these technologies is to current export earnings. These should be covered in an economic impact review. This is a significant omission currently. This bill will no doubt lead to both customer and import country sanctions in key export markets, particularly Europe. Currently, arable export earnings are heavily reliant on high-value seed remultiplication into the European market. Communications with our current seed customers have shown this bill will result in a complete loss of some productions for European markets, as well as have significant effects on seed exports to Southeast Asia. In our view, we will never be competitive in producing GMO soy, canola, or corn seeds into the commodity markets. Yet in contrast, we have inquiries every year from offshore seed companies looking for us to produce GMO-free seed for sensitive markets. The compliance costs, as has been covered in other submissions, are likely to be significant and must be considered in any economic impact report. Even under our current non-GMO regulations, 22% of our $30 million worth of honey exports currently require a non-GMO statement. Based on the current bill and its current form, we would expect up to a 50% reduction in export earnings from the arable and honey sectors. The risk to market access and trade must be included as part of the assessment criteria for the bill to proceed. Secondly, any changes to New Zealand's gene editing regulations must be timed very conservatively and be based on the status of regulations of our major high-value trading partners. As an export-driven economy, New Zealand must be a follower in regard to the regulation of new technologies, not a leader, to protect our market access. New Zealand needs to allow the regulations in these markets to settle in prior to changing our regulations in order to protect these markets. Europe is heading down this road, but they're not there yet. If we lead, we lose the market. Thirdly, we strongly recommend that the New Zealand government does not permit the outdoor release of traditional 20 to 30-year-old genetically modified production plants and organisms. In many jurisdictions, there is a zero tolerance for GMO contamination of seeds for sowing. You can eat it, you can wear it, but you cannot plant it. Coexistence between GMO and non-GMO farming systems, especially seed production, will be extremely difficult to manage and with many unintentional risks and consequences. As an example of this, white clover is a globally important pasture legume. New Zealand is the world's largest white clover seed producer, supplying up to 50% of the world's white clover. Any GMO or GE clover field release in New Zealand risks this market being closed due to cross-contamination by pollinators. The same can be said for high-value brassica seed crops, including canola for Europe and other vegetable brassicas exported throughout Asia. Any release of a GMO forage brassica, particularly a forage rape or turnip species, would pose a real threat to our GMO-free brassica seed business. The old-style technology of modification offers little value to the New Zealand economy and in an agricultural sense generally promotes poor agronomic practice, such as the overuse of agrochemical. In regards to our apiary business, beekeepers are powerless to prevent GMO pollen contaminating their honey. Beekeepers cannot control where the bees forage and will not know the GMO status of their crops surrounding their hives. Pollen of GMO maize or brassica contaminating high-value Manuka honey, resulting in positive GMO test results, is a real possibility. It would highly likely that New Zealand honey exporters would need to put a mandatory product may contain GMO statements on honey products to ensure it meets importing country regulations. And many of our markets target high-value, health-conscious consumers. And even if we meet the import regulations, the value to these customers is likely lost. It's a very big concern in the Manuka industry. Both physical and genetic contamination of high-value primary industry products, such as seeds and honey, will derail New Zealand's export earnings to GMO-sensitive markets. And most of the risks we've detailed to current trade markets can be extensively mitigated by not allowing the use of traditional transgenic technology and by regulating gene editing in line with our high-value trading partners rather than developing world-leading regulation.
And I'd just like to finish by saying we finally would like to urge you consider the impact of this bill in its current form on our local rural community. Not only do we create jobs, we support others. We literally have hundreds of nights accommodation in our region from our international customers. This creates demand for hospitality and tourism add-ons. We need cleaning stores, we need the government for agencies, and we need research institutes. We're just everyday people working really hard to sell the New Zealand brand, and we deserve a slightly better bill than currently in front of us. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to any questions.
Thank you for your time as well. We've got 2 minutes. Steve, you can jump up.
What is the huge potential worth of us as a nation, or unique ability of us as a nation, an island nation isolated from the rest of the world, to maintain that non-GMO status and continue to be able to provide non-GMO seed to the rest of the world?
Well, we think that would come out in the economic analysis if it was done for this bill. We are fortunate with the country we live in, its isolation and its climate, and we're able to provide food, fibre and seeds for a large part of the world where they cannot do it for themselves. So up until now, we've gone very well without having any alterations to the bill. We don't wish to stand in front of new technologies. Both of us are researchers, and we like to see how we can be innovative. New Zealand farming is innovative. That's why we're world leaders. So I think we just need to strike a suitable balance to make sure that we can supply customers that really need our product with something that they are happy with and are prepared to pay us for.
This balance is not struck in this bill.
Not in its current one.
Great.
But it's a step in the right direction.
The bill is a step in the right direction. Yeah. No, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in here. Really appreciate it. It's good submission.
Thank you.
Got it.
All right. What did you guys think of this submission?
I agree with it mostly, apart from it's a step in the right direction. I'm not sure how that follows. When I was writing my submission, I contacted our insurance company. So say we export some beef and it turns out that it's been contaminated with GMO ryegrass and that somehow affects the protein, which Jack will be able to explain that or tell me that I'm completely wrong in that. But I said, so what happens if China rejects our meat because it's contaminated with GMO? And the insurance company wrote back with incoherent babble because they didn't really understand what I was talking about. But essentially what would happen is that we wouldn't get paid from the meatworks, and they would also charge us for dumping the contaminated meat. So instead of getting $20,000 income, we'd lose that $20,000, plus we might be charged $20,000 for the disposal of the unwanted meat. And it could negatively affect other farmers who have been in that export lot. And so then we could be sued by those other farmers as well. So that's the worst case scenario on a practical level. And this bill just provides nothing in terms of what the regulatory or protection component is on just a beef farm that's regenerative. So am I completely on the wrong track?
No.
I think a dog agrees with you.
Even the dog agrees. Yeah. I think that I think in some ways it's more complicated than even you just presented. And the issue is that when in your last panel, I caught a little bit of the last panel, and this was being discussed as well. They are making it possible to use gene technology by in places and on organisms for which we've always traditionally done it in a containment facility. And the importance of that is it won't just be that your cattle might be grazing on GM forage. Worldwide, that is already a phenomenon where cattle graze on GM forage, and under certain jurisdictions, you can distinguish between the cow being genetically engineered and its food being genetically engineered. I know that's not everywhere, but somewhere, and that's some step towards this. The threat to your business, though, is even more complicated than that. And the reason is because it's not just that the biotechnology has advanced and become more efficient, and we call those gene editing reactions the most efficient of our gene technologies now. It's that the way in which we apply those gene editors has changed also in the last 15 years. There's been a revolution in the chemistry and in the development of biological vectors that are used to deliver these gene editing tools into the cells of living organisms. And we can do that now with such efficiency that you don't need a laboratory. You can package gene editors as pesticides to spray them from airplanes onto fields.
Whoa, right.
And they won't distinguish between a plant, a cow, a microbe, or a fungus or a human being. Those chemistries don't know the difference. They're able to carry these gene editing tools into the cells of anything. Now, the most difficult of the organisms may still be plants, but they're still very good even with plants. And that's what's new since Hasno. We've always been able to do gene editing. We've had gene editing tools for bacteria, fungi, and animals since the late 1970s. So this is just hogwash, this idea that suddenly gene editing is a brand new kind of technology. But the tools for delivering it efficiently have changed a lot. That means that your cattle themselves may be detected as genetically engineered if spray drift from the use of gene editors as a pesticide has contacted the flesh of your cattle while they were outside. And that residue may still be detectable in their cells after they've been slaughtered and sold as meat. Also, all the microbes that are on them that may contaminate the product, but be fully acceptable in most trading regimes, could also have been altered by the gene editing tools. So it's not just that they may have had a history of eating a GMO, it's that they may be in real time actual GMOs or contaminated with actual GMOs that are inseparable from them because of this unregulated use of the gene editors outside of a containment facility.
So if you have the soil microbes, as best as I understand it, we only really know about 0.1% of what is in the soil life. And we already have these amazing antibiotics, and even that dreaded ivermectin was only discovered in one place in the world, which was in Japan, outside of a golf course in the soil. And we don't really even know what's in New Zealand soil, and we're risking contaminating all of that. So we might have all of these amazing antibiotics and medicines in our soil, which we're not currently studying, that are not only going to be destroyed by the GMO efficient sprays that we're going to get. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, we would have to use quite a lot of it to stop all the, to change all the microbes because there's so many, right? So that's a possibility, but it's unlikely. But what we could generate are brand new kinds of traits in soil microorganisms, in insects, and in fungi, in all sorts of things that are difficult for us to track and exist in high numbers. And the difference between what happens in nature, where those same kinds of things might arise by chance somewhere in the world, in some period of time, usually measured in hundreds of millions of years, where you get a single mutation that has an important effect, and then it amplifies into a population of organisms with that trait. That's how it happens in nature. The difference between that and what we can do with gene technology is that we make an entire population of them all at once and in the same place. So we overcome one of the most important barriers to the evolution of harmful organisms with a technology. And that's what's so different about how nature does it. Nature can produce harmful things to us, but it does so at such a low frequency. Even though it might seem like it happens a lot, it's really a low frequency on a global and temporal scale.
I mean, most mutations are neutral.
And the vast majority are neutral or deleterious to the organism. Yep. The difference is if we're going to make something that's inadvertently harmful, we do so at scale, because that is what makes it a technology.
Right.
I didn't even know that there were sprays that could alter the genetics of that. That's wild. I mean, I was looking up papers and whatnot. It's like, if you heard about, I don't know if you've heard about this from the Nature scientific reports, the potential for CRISPR gene drive to eradicate or suppress globally invasive social wasps. I don't know if you're familiar with that paper, but it looks over the potential use for it here in New Zealand and in Europe. And it's like, okay, I've just learned something new.
A lot of a lot of the evidence a lot of the advocacy for the GMO has been to eradicate pests like possums or rewilding pines, and they've sort of tried to talk people into, or farmers particularly, into trying to get rid of incorporating GMO in order to get rid of pests, but they don't really know what it's actually going to create once they introduce it, because it doesn't end there. And it's sort of like we're standing there with people about to introduce gorse and possums and rabbits and saying, please stop. And they're just sort of barreling ahead.
We're industrializing changing genomes. And therefore, we're at the cusp of making the next and most important pollution for the future. Just like the production of plastics from fossil fuels that was achieved in the early 20th century is now one of our most important pollutions. We are on the verge of the next. That doesn't mean, though, that everything that could be invented or used will be useless or of more harm than good. But I think what we need to do is see this bill for what it is. There's two kinds of things we're talking about. We're talking about the production of an organism that after it's made, in release, it causes a harm. And that is a form of technology, but that's just one form of gene technology. The other technology we're talking about is how we make organisms that are different. It's the process by which we make change. And the process is a mutagenic process. Gene editing is a highly mutagenic tool. And its use outside of contained facilities means it's mutagenizing lots of organisms all at once and creating new traits with an unprecedented efficiency because they're targeted. The targeting is sold to us as some kind of safety benefit, but it's not a safety benefit. It's an efficiency gain for industry, and it increases the potential at which an undesirable product is made and then made at scale. So the idea of using a gene drive is there is some acceptance of this in the sense that if you've produced the organism with the first genome carrying the drive, and you've done that in a contained facility, and you can fully describe the organism, then you could probably test at least some of the possible ways in which it could cause harm before it's released. At least you could try. But what's really different between doing that and what this bill allows you to do is that you can make things, possibly not gene drives, but all sorts of other kinds of mutant phenotypes that will never be tested or described before they're released. They may not be what you intended to make. They may not even be in the organism you intended to change, but they will be already released because they won't be made in a containment facility for which all those organisms would have been destroyed had they not been what you wanted and not been in the organism you wanted it to be in.
So basically, out in the environment, you don't have the same controls that you'd have in a laboratory to manage those mutations and to test those mutations. You basically just got a free-for-all out in the environment.
That's right. And can I say not laboratory, containment facility?
Containment facility.
The HAZMO Act defines a laboratory as a van with a running water source.
Okay, I'm not talking about the van with the running water source. Containment facility. All right, are we ready to look at the next submission?
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook